The subject of today's video has a crazy story. He won the award for the most athletic recruit in his class. He was seen as the next D'Anthony Thomas and had offers from pretty much every school in college football. He went from basically a surefire NFL draft pick to someone who went off the rails a little bit. He spent time at 2 Power 5 schools before he had to go the junior college route, got in trouble with the law, and then had to save his career at a smaller Group of 5 school. He said he went from having everything to having nothing, but the subject of today's video found a way to persevere. In today's video, we're going to talk about one of the top athletes from the class of 2014, go through his tumultuous college career, and what ultimately happened to him. But before we get started in today's video, this is the first video in season 2 of my What Happened To videos, so be sure to check out all my videos in this season, as I'll leave a link to the playlist down below, and a link to each and every video. Before we get started, nearly 80% of you guys are not subscribed to the channel, so be sure to hit that subscribe button as I really appreciate it. And now, let's get started. So you're probably wondering who the subject of today's video is, and it is none other than current Miami Dolphin and former Oregon Duck and Texas A&M Aggie, Kirk Merritt. But in order to understand what happened to Kirk Merritt, we need to go back in time and see how he rose. Kirk Merritt loved football from a young age and grew up in the hotbed of Louisiana. He eventually went to a high school known for producing high-level talent, and he had dreamed of going to the NFL since he was 5 years old. It would eventually happen, but it was a long and crazy road, and at one point, it looked like he would never make it. He went to Destrehan High School, which produces a ton of talent, and its most notable alum is Ed Reed. He became a football star and was viewed as somewhat of a prodigy, and his high school coach had this to say, quote, "He was a tremendous athlete, a great track star, and he could play in the backfield as a running back or a receiver. He was a tremendous football player to be able to do both. He was in fact an athletic freak, as it showed at the annual Nike Spark competition. In 2014, he beat out 100 of the nation's most highly recruited players, and he won the Spark National Championship. He ran a 4.43 40-yard dash time, which was better than future NFL players in Minkah Fitzpatrick and Josh Sweat. He was compared to D'Anthony Thomas at this point, and at 5'11", 200 pounds, Merritt had a 45-inch vertical, ran that 4.43 40 time, and had the best power throw of any athlete in the country. Because of that, he was obviously named the most athletic player in his class, and he had this to say about it. Quote, "It felt great. The year before, I was just working on my vertical, the 40, and my shuttle time. I'd like to thank my trainer and my coaches for helping me to be able to do all of that. It was a humbling experience, and all that recognition felt good." He obviously blossomed into a big-time recruit and was labeled a 4-star player by almost every site. He had a ton of SEC offers, but one school on the West Coast really sold him. He was down to Texas A&M, Auburn, Alabama, and Oregon, and eventually decided to commit to the Ducks. He said, quote, "I really loved it there. I watched YouTube videos of the facilities, and I really loved the coaches. I trust them on what position I can play, and I want to be an Oregon Duck." So yeah, he was now committed to the same exact place that he blew up at, and Oregon was getting a star. According to 24/7 Sports, Kirk Merritt was a 4-star recruit, the number 5 all-purpose back, and the 170th best player in the class of 2015. Merritt would arrive in Eugene, Oregon, and he would have a role from the very beginning. He'd see his first action against Georgia State, where he'd catch 1 pass for 5 yards. He'd have 2 more catches on the road against Washington, and then he'd have his best game of the year with 2 catches for 38 yards against Oregon State. While it wasn't the biggest role in the world, he at least got his feet wet in the system and proved that he was going to be a playmaker in the future. At the time, the Oregon Ducks had a quarterback in Vernon Adams, and he helped lead them to a 9-4 record. Merritt finished the year with 5 catches for 61 yards, with 3 carries for 13 yards as well, while also making some tackles and returning a few kicks. Despite a flash of success, he would decide to enter the transfer portal, where he would have to sit out a year. Kirk had this to say about it, quote, "It was just to get closer to home, and my people were not able to travel to Oregon that much. Who knows what the real reason was, but it seemed he was a little bit homesick, and he wanted the people around him to be able to watch him play. Obviously, he had a ton of schools calling his name, and he eventually settled on what was his second option coming out of high school, Texas A&M. Unfortunately, though, he would never suit up in an Aggie uniform. Just weeks before he was about to make his debut, he had been dismissed from the Texas A&M football team. There were reports that he had exposed himself to 2 different tutors, and this obviously did not sit well with the coaching staff and made national attention. Kirk was very embarrassed by this and said he had to block a lot of people on social media, and it was a very tough time in his life. His lawyer apparently said he had a bad case of an itch and that he had no intention of anything sexual towards those tutors. He ended up pleading not guilty, and after clearing some hurdles, he would be able to play football again, but it would be in a completely different world. He had settled on East Mississippi Community College and was part of the show Last Chance U, and played alongside star quarterback Lindsey Scott Jr. While he was with the Lions, he had 52 catches for 4 touchdowns in that 1 year. He also averaged an absurd 12.1 yards per carry and helped them win a national championship. Merritt had this to say about the whole experience. Quote, "There was some adversity that I'm glad I went through, and it helped me change my perspective on football as well as life. I bonded with the guys even more and won the national championship for JUCO level. It all worked out in the end." According to my research, he did have a Power 5 offer from Mississippi State, but in all the articles about his actual commitment, that offer was not listed. He ended up choosing Arkansas State over the likes of Tulane, Louisiana, UTSA, and Troy. Head coach Blake Anderson was getting a star player in Merritt, and he was going to help turn his career around. He would end up leading the team with over 1,000 yards, but he also played alongside Omar Bayless, who was an All-American, and Jonathan Adams Jr., who most recently played for the Lions after a great 2020 season. Led by quarterback Justice Hansen, Merritt got a lot of opportunities in 2018. We'd have to flash forward all the way till his 5th game when he'd catch his first touchdown, but in that game, he had 11 catches for 92 yards in the score on the road against Georgia Southern. From there, he also had over 100 yards and a touchdown in a loss to Louisiana, and then finished the year with 2 touchdowns against both Louisiana Monroe and Texas State. The guy was an absolute stud, as after their bowl loss in Nevada, he had caught 83 passes for 1,005 yards and 7 touchdowns. Merritt had put his name on the map and had lived up to all the athletic potential he had coming out of high school. He potentially could have gone to the NFL, but I don't think he was good enough at that point, so he decided to come back for the 2019 season. In 2019, led by former Alabama quarterback Lane Hatcher, Kirk Merritt, Omar Bayless, and Jonathan Adams formed one of the scariest trios of wide receivers in all of college football. Despite not catching as many receiving yards, Merritt had a huge year when it came to touchdowns. There were 3 different occasions where he caught more than 2 scores, and he had a touchdown in all but 3 games that year. His best performance came against Southern Illinois, as he caught 10 passes for 131 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he also helped lead Arkansas State to a bowl game. In his final collegiate game against Florida International, he caught 6 passes for 43 yards and a score. He finished the 2019 season with 70 receptions for 806 yards and 12 touchdowns. Merritt had a spectacular 2-year career with the Red Wolves, and now he is ready for his next opportunity, the NFL. Because of his past and his production at Arkansas State, Merritt was seen as a sleeper in the 2020 NFL Draft, but unfortunately he went undrafted. Thankfully, he was picked up by the Miami Dolphins, and he was seen as an athletic freak still. Competing and working all offseason, Merritt was unfortunately cut from the 53-man roster, but in early November, he would get his opportunity. He was eventually promoted to the 53-man roster, and Merritt's hopes and dreams since he was 5 years old of making the NFL had finally come true. Unfortunately, he never got to register an NFL stat in 2020, but he would work his tail off and make a lot of noise in the 2021 offseason, and many thought he would make the roster. His best game came in the preseason as he caught 3 passes for 72 yards and a touchdown against the Bengals, and it was going to be a game-time decision to see if he would make the roster. Unfortunately, he was the last player cut for the Dolphins, and this was definitely heartbreaking for him. Apparently, he was too inconsistent to make the team, but he was definitely someone worth keeping on the practice squad, and in case injuries happened, he would be promoted. As of Wednesday, October 6th, the Miami Dolphins had to place Will Fuller on IR, so maybe this will be Merritt's opportunity. Maybe he'll be promoted to the active roster, and he will finally get his opportunity to show what he can do in the league. I'm really hoping and praying he gets his opportunity, and I'm definitely going to keep a close eye on the Dolphins to see if he's getting his opportunity. So overall, Merritt has made it to the NFL, and he's had a crazy journey, but what ultimately went wrong for him? Well, it's quite simple. I think it was the off-the-field issues. He was an athletic freak coming out of high school and showed early production in his career at Oregon. While he would have had the opportunity to have a larger role there, he decided to leave for a different school, and those 2 incidents with the tutors definitely messed everything up. It put a target on his back, and from there on out, he would always be seen as a player with character issues. I don't think college production was an issue because he was alongside 2 future NFL players and still managed to nearly catch 2,000 yards and 20 touchdowns in just 2 years as a Red Wolf. Combine that with the fact that he was still an athletic freak, there was really no reason why he shouldn't have been drafted, and the only thing I really think it could be is those quote-unquote character issues. I definitely think Merritt has moved on from that, and there's still a lot of uncertainties about that situation in general, and the last thing I want to do is make any assumptions. Overall, it's crazy to see how recruits pan out, and for someone who is one of the top athletes in the class, it's been a crazy journey for him, and most people probably don't even know his story or anything that went on, so I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button as it really helps the video, the channel, and the algorithm, and let me know another player I can take a look at next. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe, and check out all my other videos in Season 2 of my What Happened To videos down in the comment section. Also, be sure to check one of those out on the end screen, and I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.